Donnie Cates is a rising superstar writer and is 4 issues into his newest run for Venom. And with it, we've seen some really interesting lore coming into the world of Venom, including Knull, the god of symbiotes. And in today's video, we're going to take a look at his origins, powers, and his backstory surrounding him, and why I think he's pretty cool.
Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell to become legendary so you don't miss any Key Issues content, and let us know if there's any legends down in the chat.
So Donnie Cates is a really hot writer right now. His newest run of Venom has helped put him on the map, but he's also really seemed to take off with his new run on Thanos over the last 2 years. This run saw him introduce Cosmic Ghost Rider, which was an issue that pretty much immediately shot up to the top of spectators' buy piles. If you want a copy of that, hit up eBay and expect to pay a pretty penny. Anywho, the point of this video is actually to discuss the newest Venom run. In this newest run, Venom struggles to control his symbiote. He's awoken one night after having a dream where an army of symbiotes attack a castle where Beowulf is at. That's the same Beowulf of legend, the one that fights Grendel. Eddie wakes up realizing that the nightmare was not actually his own nightmare, it was his symbiote's nightmare. And unaware that symbiotes could have nightmares, or dreams for that matter, he ends up taking some antipsychotics to shut it out. Later, during a botched gun sales deal between some villains and the new Jack-o'-lantern, the symbiote seriously hurts the new Jack-o'-lantern and he begs for his life. The symbiote starts speaking an ancient language and the symbiote's eyes disappear and it turns into this weird spiral design, and you realize that Eddie has absolutely no control over the symbiote at this point. Venom goes on to be put in contact with an army vet who explains that Spider-Man and Eddie were not the first 2 people to come in contact with the symbiote. They were actually used as a part of Project Rebirth, the same project that made Captain America. In this project, they ended up unearthing an ancient symbiote and they attempted to bond that symbiote, or at least pieces of it, to soldiers. Some of the guys who were involved in the project ended up being permanently bonded with their symbiotes, and now these symbiote soldiers were eventually put on ice because they weren't able to be controlled, and their fellow veteran, the guy who's talking to Eddie Brock, wants to find them before they're destroyed. Venom tracks down their convoy to an underground tunnel system and attempts to free them before the other symbiotes appear, all speaking the same weird language with the same weird spiral design on their face. Eddie again loses control of his symbiote, which allows these others to mortally wound Eddie. They then abandon their hosts, killing them, and turn into a large dragon, and it flies away, which is pretty badass. Eddie's symbiote eventually helps him recover, and they track down this mystery army vet again. He explains that the new symbiote is something different than the others. It's much older than the other symbiotes, and when he originally bonded with it, he saw flashes of it devouring entire civilizations over countless millions of years. Eddie sets out to stop the symbiote dragon, but he's jumped by Miles Morales. When Eddie comes to during the fight, he realizes that the symbiote has lost control again, and he's watching himself beat Miles Morales to death. He's able to regain control just long enough to tell Miles to kill him. Miles hits him with this Venom blast, which kind of helps Eddie regain control of the symbiote, and Eddie and Miles decide to squash their beef and face the symbiote dragon together. Eddie deduces that a large enough Venom blast from Miles might actually have enough punch in it to stop the dragon, so Miles puts everything he has into one big shot, and the entire series literally goes apeshit from here. After the dust settles, Miles is shown hanging from the grasp of a new character. This character we go on to learn is named Knull, and he is the god of symbiotes. He is the original symbiote, able to control, harness, and bend symbiotes to his will. Knull forces Eddie's symbiote to abandon him, and Knull forcibly burns out and removes all of the weakness or humanity the symbiote has accrued by being bonded with Eddie for so long. We next learn about Knull's backstory, and Knull is old. Like, really, really old. Billions of years old. He comes from a time before the universe had light. His first conscious memories are of celestials and gods battling for control of the darkness. It's unclear what really birthed Knull. He seems to kind of always existed in this space, just dormant, waiting for some kind of a purpose. And he finds that purpose with the arrival of these celestials. Knull seems to take offense from the fact that the Celestials are reforging and reforming his darkness into space, complete with life and stars and a bunch of stuff that he doesn't like. So he decides to do the most rational thing and decapitate the first one he comes across. And inside of this Celestial's head, he builds a forge. In this forge, he builds the first symbiote, and quite possibly one of the coolest weapons in the entire Marvel Universe, All Black, the Necrosword. It's the act of forging this blade, the original symbiote, that all symbiotes are born, and additionally they retain the memories of this original forging. The act of being forged in fire makes symbiotes afraid of fire, and the act of the clanking of the hammer on the symbiote is also what makes them afraid of loud sounds, which is really interesting lore additions. Okay, quick side note. If you don't know what the Necrosword is, then you should definitely check out the Jason Aaron run of Thor, God of Thunder. In this run, Thor faces Gorr the God Butcher, who wields the Necrosword to kill a bajillion different manners of gods throughout time and space. In fact, in order to actually stop Gorr, Thor must go into the future and team up with a future version of himself. Also during this run, Thor gets a hold of the Necrosword and uses it to beat the crap out of Galactus, who comes back to Earth to finally consume it after all of the heroes have died off and King Thor is all that is left. All Black, the Necrosword, has a number of unique abilities besides being awesome to say. It has the ability to manipulate dark energy, which is probably its strongest benefit. It's super durable, strong and fast, it can create dark energy constructs and minions, and there's a bunch of other information out there on the internet, but from what I've read, there seems to be a lot of assumptions made. So some websites state that it amplifies the user's strength and speed and reflexes, but the original Jason Aaron run never really mentioned that. I'm not sure if the blade is like Mjolnir and that it enhances the user's abilities, or if Gorr was just really strong beforehand. Anyway, back to Knull. Knull eventually loses the blade and falls in combat to another god wearing golden armor. Gorr actually witnesses this battle, which helps him determine that gods are real, and at some point relative to this, he obtains the Necrosword and goes on to have his own unique arc with Thor. Knull eventually recovers after many years. He finds that if he extends his abyss out and allows it to bond with other beings, he can learn from them and pilot them as long as they're bonded with his abyss. He breaks pieces of himself and his abyss off and allows them to bond with other creatures. These pieces go on to be the next symbiotes. Using this ability, he conquers countless worlds and controls the beings throughout his symbiotes, acting as a hive mind. Eventually, Knull attempts to enslave humanity around the year 700 AD when Beowulf was composed, acting as a Grendel. Thor arrives to protect humanity and blasts Knull's symbiote dragon with lightning. This separates his control over his hive mind and shatters his control over the symbiotes, effectively ending his rule over a large chunk of the galaxy. The symbiotes that were out in the galaxy and untethered now start bonding with new hosts and learn new emotions and feelings. They eventually rise up against Knull and imprison him. His consciousness is split in two. The hive mind is imprisoned on Clintar, or I guess I should say Clintar, aka a cage. That's the word that the symbiotes use to say cage. It's not actually the name of their race. The other part of his consciousness is trapped in the symbiote dragon that fell on Earth long ago to its battle with Thor. The word Clintar, which was long believed to be the planet of the symbiotes, is not actually a planet at all. Knull explains that it's actually a prison that was created by the other pieces of him and designed as a cage to contain him so that he can't break free. When S.H.I.E.L.D. unearthed the symbiote dragon long ago and used it to make super soldiers, this reawakens Knull, who's slowly been regaining his composure and strength. And that is about where we are in the story. It's actually really interesting. Knull seems to be a powerful, godlike being, and he is the self-proclaimed god of the symbiotes. He seems to have created them. He has all of the powers of a god: enhanced strength, speed, reflexes, and longevity. He doesn't seem to need to eat or breathe, and he can survive in space. And he has some really unique powers as well. His ability to pilot vessels over an endless expanse of space is pretty awesome, and he can control symbiotes and use them to enslave other beings, which is really brutal and twisted. It adds a whole new depth to where and what symbiotes are. His only real weakness appears to be lightning, specifically divine lightning cast down by Thor, so who knows, we may end up seeing a Venom and Thor team up to stop Knull. I have to say that this character is really interesting to me, and I already think that this is probably one of the best Venom runs in history. I know I'm probably on that Donnie Cates hype train, but he doesn't really seem, Venom that is, to have a lot of lore associated with the character, and this is going to add a ton of that and a ton of depth to the symbiotes, which is something I think the character and the alien symbiotes needed for a long time. That is about it for this video. If you learned a lot, I hope you share this video with a friend and, maybe consider becoming a subscriber. Also, big shout out to our patrons, including a special shout out to Schrodinger's Loki. Thank you guys for your support. Thanks for checking this video out. This has been Nick with Key Issues, and you know the motto, comics over everything.